in which the last dangling threads of our story play out in the aftermath of Anna's death. Chapter 9. These thoughts wearied and tormented him now less, now more strongly, but they never left him. He read and pondered, and the more he read and pondered, the further he felt himself from the goal he was pursuing. Recently in Moscow and in the country, convinced that he would not find an answer in the materialists, he reread, or read for the first time, Plato and Spinoza, Kant, Schelling, Hegel, and Schopenhauer, the philosophers who give a non-materialistic explanation of life. Their thoughts seemed fruitful to him when he was either reading or devising refutations of other teachings, especially that of the materialists. But as soon as he read or himself devised answers to the questions, one and the same thing always repeated itself, following the given definitions of vague words such as spirit, will, freedom, substance, deliberately falling into the verbal trap set for him by the philosophers or by himself. He seemed to begin to understand something, but he had only to forget the artificial train of thought and refer back from life itself to what had satisfied him while he thought along a given line, and suddenly the whole artificial edifice would collapse like a house of cards, and it would be clear that the edifice had been made of the same words rearranged, independent of something more important in life than reason. Once, reading Schopenhauer, he substituted love for his will, and this new philosophy comforted him for a couple of days, until he stepped back from it. But it collapsed in the same way when he later looked at it from life, and turned out to be warmthless muslin clothing. His brother Sergei Ivanovich advised him to read the theological works of Khomyakov. Levin read the second volume of Khomyakov's writings, and despite the elegant and witty polemical tone which put him off at first, was struck by their teachings about the Church. He was struck first by the thought that it is not given to man to comprehend divine truths, but it is given to an aggregate of men united by love, the Church. He rejoiced at the thought of how much easier it was to believe in the presently existing, living Church, which constitutes the entire faith, which has God at its head and is therefore holy and infallible, and from it to receive one's beliefs about God, creation, the fall, redemption, then to begin with God, the distant, mysterious God, creation, and so on. But later, having read a history of the Church by a Catholic writer and a history of the Church by an Orthodox writer, and seeing that the two churches, infallible in their essence, rejected each other, he became disappointed in Khomyakov's teaching about the Church as well, and this edifice fell to dust just as the philosophical edifices had done. All that spring he was not himself, and lived through terrible moments. Without knowing what I am and why I am here, it is impossible for me to live, and I cannot know that, therefore I cannot live, Levin would say to himself. In infinite time, in the infinity of matter, in infinite space, a bubble organism separates itself, and that bubble holds out for a while, and then bursts, and that bubble is me. This was a tormenting untruth, but it was the soul, the latest result of age-long labors of human thought in that direction. This was the latest belief on which all researches of the human mind in almost all fields were built. This was the reigning conviction, and out of all other explanations it was precisely this one that Levine, himself not knowing when or how, had involuntarily adopted as being at any rate the most clear. But it was not only untrue, it was the cruel mockery of some evil power, evil and offensive, which it was impossible to submit to. It was necessary to be delivered from this power, and deliverance was within everyone's reach. It was necessary to stop this dependence on evil, and there was one means: death. And happiness, family life, a healthy man, Levine was several times so close to suicide that he hid a rope lest he hang himself with it, and was afraid to go about with a rifle lest he shoot himself. But Levine did not shoot himself or hang himself, and went on living. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.